All right, good evening, everybody. First, we have a hearing for school choice. So first I'll do a roll call. We have Susan, Rob, Tom, Will, Randy, June, Dave, and myself, Craig, are present. I hereby inform the committee and the audience members of the recording of this meeting, and our next scheduled meeting of the North Middlesex Regional School Committee will be held on Monday, March 2nd, right here at the high school. So I'd like to open the public hearing on school choice for the year 2020 to 2021, according to Chapter 76, Section 12B of the Massachusetts General Laws. All interested persons will be given the opportunity to be heard, so we'll call this hearing to order. Brad, Superintendent?
So I would like to recommend that the committee approve for school choice to continue for next school year, and we will provide, if approved, a recommended number of slots at a later date. But I would like to see it continue. Right now we have 81 students that are school choiced in. There is room in the district currently, and it is also a source of revenue for the district.
I make a motion that we approve school choice for the 2020-2021 school year.
Second. Any other discussion, or anybody from the audience like to make any comments or have any questions? Anybody from the committee? All right, hearing none, the motion is to approve school choice for the 2020-2021 school year. All those in favor, please say aye. 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 Any opposed? All right, that is unanimous. Thank you.
Motion to close public hearing on school choice.
Sounds good.
Second.
Will and Randy. All those in favor of closing the open hearing, please signify by saying aye. 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 Any opposed? All right. So we are going to take a 2-minute recess, as we can't start the next hearing until 7:05. All right, and we're back. So we will now call to order the open public hearing for the FY 2020/21 proposed budget. Do you want to make a motion, Will?
We gotta open it first.
It is open.
He just opened.
I just, oh, okay.
Why did you I should have just left it closed. We open?
Can't.
We have to do it on time. I propose we suspend the opening hearing so we can open the regular school committee for a couple minutes.
All right. So I have a second on that?
Second.
There we go.
Thank you. Okay, so all those in favor, please say aye. 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 Any opposed? Okay, so we're now going to call to order our regular school committee meeting. I'll send you some notes. So present we have Susan, Rob, Tom, Will, Randy, June, Dave, and myself, Craig. Again, I inform everybody that this meeting is being recorded and for future playback. I'm going to forego the pledge right now and the next meeting because I already covered that. And we're going to skip down to the student representatives report so they don't have to sit through the entire meeting before we get to that.
All right, so on January 31st, which was last Friday, NOLA Service Learning hosted their annual Super Bowl. So basically the public was open to bring in a bunch of different soups, and they had a competition to whoever wanted to make the best soup. We raised almost $1,200 that is going towards our trip.
And then Wednesday, February 5th, we had the Triumph Benefit Concert, and myself and the other Triumph members had the privilege of performing and raising money for the Suicide Prevention Awareness Program, and we made about $1,600 off that for the program. So that was awesome. And then for our upcoming events, Best Buddies is doing the concessions at the basketball games. There's one tomorrow, the 11th, and one Friday, the 14th. And members of Best Buddies will be running concessions this week at the basketball games, and all the proceeds will go to our chapter.
And then this Thursday, we have we have like 40 students traveling to the Galapagos with Miss Messina and a couple other teachers. So they're leaving on Thursday along with the service learning group traveling down to New Orleans. And then On March 4th to the 7th, the Student Council, there's about 19 of us traveling down to Hyannis for a leadership conference that is statewide, and one of our members is running for a state delegate position for vice president.
And then the student versus faculty basketball game is taking place March 13th here at the high school. And then
That is still in the works.
still in the works, yeah.
And then a very big hit for the Student Council events is the Hypnotist Show. It's coming up on March 20th, so Dan Crandall, our lovely hypnotist that comes every year, will be coming in and hypnotizing all seniors that bring in permission forms.
And then, last but not least, April 7th, we're having Leadership Day, and I think you're chairing that too.
Yeah.
It's an opportunity for the middle schoolers to come down to the high school on a half day and do different workshops similar to what we do at conferences, just to give them the experience of like high school student council and like what they can pursue when they come to NM.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, want to make a motion to go back? No, we'll do that later.
Make a motion to return to the public hearing for the budget. Second.
Okay, Will and Tom. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. Now we're back in our public hearing. The superintendent will present an overview of the proposed fiscal year 2021 budget for the North Middlesex Regional School District. The public has the opportunity to address the school committee relative to the proposed FY21 budget. And then already on Thursday, February 6th, the budget was available online on the district website, and hard copies could be picked up in the superintendent's office between 9 and 2. All interested parties will have the opportunity to be heard at this meeting. So first, I'll turn it over to the superintendent to do a brief presentation.
Okay, thank you. So up here on the screen is a slide presentation, the much shorter version of what I believe is a 24-page narrative that is available on the website called the second draft of the FY21 budget message. So we can start with this. This has most of the salient points. If we can go to the second slide. So this year, again, goal is to be transparent, responsible with the budget. Something that we did that was different this year was that we started very early in the process, and we set up meetings with the town manager or town administrator from each town, and along with those three individuals, a member of the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee were also invited to participate. We held meetings in September, November, and most recently, the last Friday in January. So again, I think from the get-go this year, it's been communicated well with regard to the status of our budget. So the budget, again, is a vehicle by which school leaders put out a plan to make sure that staff and students have what they need to make sure the mission and core values of the district is being accomplished. We can move on to the next one. The one big difference in our education today is the need to make sure that students are properly supported with regard to social, emotional learning and some of the challenges that students face today. Areas of focus for 2021 is to create a proposed budget that's transparent and specific so the school committee and community leaders can understand our proposals and how they support the educational vision of the district. You may or may not be aware that we just passed a 5-year strategic plan back in the fall. So this budget will help support that. To create programmatic consistency at the preschool, elementary, and secondary levels to work towards becoming a true K-12 district. I think we're well on our way at the elementary level, and we are working towards that at the middle school level. Again, we have 2 middle schools that have different schedules. The programs are different, and we are working to address that beginning next year at the middle school level, and we've had success at the elementary level. And to build a support system to assist the superintendent with curriculum, instruction, assessment, and data analysis. Something that I do want to point out, I think it's important, is that North Middlesex is one of the few districts that has a superintendent, and an assistant superintendent, but does not have any middle management with regard to curriculum and instruction underneath that person. There are some districts that have a STEM and humanities person, 2 separate positions, and then there are other districts that have a person specific for each department. English, English language arts, history, social studies, science, the fine arts, all of those, and many districts have their own director, so to speak. We do not have any of those in place at this point in time. You can go to the next one, please. To examine potential sources of revenue that the district has at its disposal to address some of the burdens on the operating budget. We will discuss that later. To build an equitable technology infrastructure so that we can increase our purposeful use of technology to benefit students and staff, and to begin the implementation of a long-term vision for instructional materials and equipment. Three key principles are that classroom teachers and maintaining appropriate class size is very important to us. Professional learning and program evaluation are critical, and they should be ongoing. They're essential to a successful organization, and that we have, again, prioritized consistent programming at all levels to create a district as opposed to an elementary school in each town, a middle school that services 2 towns in one area, 1 town in another, and then the students come together at the high school. We want the students, again, to have a district feel as soon as they walk in the doors, and for that to build over time. Last but not least, sorry, if you can go back for 1 second, just to make sure that we are doing everything we can to market the high school so that we are not losing students to vocational technical schools, to charter schools and private schools in the area. You know, I will focus a little bit on the technical vocational schools. I think it's important that students have those opportunities, but I think the key for us is that we don't want students leaving the district because they don't want to go to North Middlesex Regional High School. We don't want that to be the reason. So we want to make sure that we market and we do what we need to do at the high school level so that if students are leaving, they're leaving for a reason that we can live with and that we can accept. So per pupil cost, you can see the per pupil costs up there. That doesn't look like it updated completely. But if you look at that, North Middlesex Regional spends just over $16,000 per student. And in the parentheses is the number of schools that those districts have. So North Middlesex has 7 schools, Groton Dunstable has 5, Grafton has 4, Tewksbury has 7, Norton has 5. The only school district that has more students on that list than North Middlesex is Tewksbury. And the reason I think that that's important to look at is that the number of buildings that we have in this district has a significant impact on our per pupil cost. So we have 7 operating right now. Previously, we had 8 until the Peter Fitz closed and went back to the town of Pepperell. So there is a significant impact that operating a building has on the per pupil cost to a district. North Middlesex Regional in 2018, the per pupil cost was $460 below the state average. So we're not above the state average by any means. North Middlesex Regional was assessed slightly over $1 million to students who opt to attend charter schools. It's a direct offset to Chapter 70 funding. And a key reason that North Middlesex Regional School District, as I said, is a little bit higher than some of our comps is because of the number of buildings that the district currently utilizes, just to review that again. The overall budget picture, currently it is a 3.78% increase over FY 2020. I will say that a month ago, it was a 4.51% increase. So we have weaned it down quite a bit to this point. It's an increase of just over $2.1 million from FY 20. As I said, the preliminary budget message, which was back in the end of December, early January, was 4.51%. And the FTE change from FY 20 to FY 2021 is also an increase, but I will point out, although that looks like a significant increase of just about 14 people, 9.4 of those positions were paraprofessionals that were eliminated last year, and we've already reinstated them into our budget this year because of special education and IEP mandates. So although again it's a 14 and change increase in FTEs, 9.4 of those have already been put into the budget and are part of our operating budget now. Where did I leave off? Thank you. Okay, so the 3.78% comes from the following: 1.62% of contractual obligations, 0.93% are active and retiree health insurance estimates, 0.23% of transportation, and 0.13% is Middlesex retirement and assessment. While I understand that contractual obligations are negotiated and that's something that I'm a part of, we do have to try to remain competitive with other districts, which I think we do. That being said, if you look at the 3.78, in my opinion, 0.87%, a 0.87% increase is essentially what the district is asking for above and beyond those other items that are listed. And again, I would say the one thing that is something that we do have some control over are contractual obligations, but those are difficult. So the changes for FY20, we already did add the 9.5 FTE paraprofessionals due to IEP and supports. I do want to point out that the addition of paraprofessionals for IEPs is not a choice. It must be done. IEPs are federal documents, and you have to make sure that you're in compliance with them. So paraprofessionals are generally there to support the plan of the IEP and to support the students in that particular classroom. We also added a full-time theater teacher at Hawthorne Brook. For FY21, what we're looking to do is the following, is reinstate the 1.0 FTE librarian that was cut from last year's budget at the Spalding Memorial School. Spalding right now is the only school in the district that does not have a librarian. We did have to cut that last year in order to get to a number that was acceptable to all three districts. The addition of a 0.6 FTE, that person, as I said, the assistant superintendent currently does not have any support. It basically relies on the principals, which can oftentimes be difficult in making sure that initiatives are pushed through at all the levels. So a 0.6 position would help with curriculum, be an administrative coach. We have several coaches in the district, several principals in the district that we currently have to pay coaches to coach them for their first 2 years. That's mandated in the state of Massachusetts, that this person will coach, so we won't have to pay people from the outside to do that anymore. And I think the most important component of this is that our goal is to have this position pay for itself, because we are looking for this person to be the grants administrator and to actively pursue as many grants as possible to, again, help impact the budget in a positive way. The addition of a 1.0 guidance counselor / school adjustment counselor will be a school adjustment counselor. Reason for that is right now we have a 0.5 at the Varnum Brook and a 0.5 at the Spalding Memorial. Both of those, and that's one person sharing that position. That one person goes between both buildings. Both buildings need a full-time person, so it's an increase of a 1.0. That also is mandated by IEPs in order to stay in compliance with individualized education plans. Reinstating a 1.0 custodial staff and adding a custodial staff. Right now, we have a significant amount of overtime that is being paid to custodians that are working above and beyond full-time. There's been an increase here at the high school on the weekends, and also it's also a significant property to cover. Right now, we only have one person that works on the grounds at the high school. It is not adequate for one person to do that position, so we're pulling from other areas to make sure that that gets covered. And other buildings are starting to show that that's happening. So making sure that we have the appropriate custodial staff, just keeping in mind on top of that, that this school district is responsible for all of its own snow removal. That's not something that is true in most school districts. Usually the DPW would handle something like that, where in North Middlesex, we handle all of it. We also handle all of the fields in Townsend and Ashby, not in Pepperell, but in Townsend and Ashby. All the fields are taken care of by the North Middlesex Facilities Department. Adding a $10,000 stipend to create a custodial foreman. Right now, if our director of facilities is out, we have no one to basically take over. It does happen, but they're working outside of a contract without any type of compensation, so we're looking for a small stipend for that person so that, again, when they are covering for our facilities and grounds director, that they are being paid for it, not working outside the contract. And also looking to add a 0.2 FTE for secretarial support for plant and facilities. Reductions will be around a 1.6 FTE. Those I cannot share at this time because all conversations have not been had with those individuals. Do you want to cover this one?
Sure.
So enrollment shifts from FY20 to FY21 they're pretty minimal. They do make a difference in how the assessments are calculated, though. From Ashby, we're seeing a reduction of students by 0.20%. Pepperell, a reduction by 0.44%, and Townsend, an increase of students by 0.65. From FY20 to FY21, it's a very, very similar amount of students enrolled. The percentages change a little bit, which is up here. Ashby will now be 11.31% of the district, Pepperell 47.96, and Townsend 40.73. Next slide.
Can I actually take the next few?
Yeah, sure. This is just a historical look back at enrollments in the district since it might be a little difficult to read, but it starts at 2006 and goes all the way to 2021. Clearly, you see the decline in enrollment that we went through. It's leveled out, and I think we have a slide that'll show that too. We had a projection done by the Nasdaq group that goes through and looks at enrollments and birth rates, and the projection is that we're going to stay fairly level. So you can literally see it tapering off here. You may not be able to see this closely, but you'll see Ashby, which is the blue line at the bottom, is going down a little bit in enrollment. And Townsend going up slightly. And again, they look like little changes, but when you're averaging this across a larger budget, it makes a big difference. Here's the NASDAQ enrollment projection from 2019 to 2029. I think it's good news in general. We've leveled, and the expectation is that we're going to stay right in that range all the way through to 2029. They've been very accurate in the past, and we have the historical enrollment projections going back quite a ways. And each year, even with the new high school coming online, they take that information and they look at the births, and they look at when the kindergartners will start and all that, and come up with a projection for us. So aside of any big changes in towns, if there was a big change in a town, they wouldn't have that information right now. But in general, we should be level for the next number of years. Keep going?
Yes.
So just as an overview on the budget has obviously multiple revenue sources, the biggest of which is the state, or close to the biggest is the state revenue section. And for each of these sections, there's a Chapter 70, Chapter 71, and a charter school. That entire section is going up 1.19%. This is representative of the governor's most recent release of his budget, which is $30 per student for the Chapter 70 line. The transportation, we're expecting, and we've been getting a little bit higher than we planned, so we bumped that up. Again, this is per the governor's numbers. And the charter is, again, bumped up for the governor's numbers. And these aren't final numbers from the state, so we have to go with an estimate. And for the past number of years, we've been using the governor's numbers because the state budget isn't finished until sometime close to July. So we will long be into our budget before those numbers come forward.
Can I just add something real quick?
Certainly.
Something to point out, too, is that the extra $30 per student is the result of the Student Opportunity Act. So that is the increase that North Middlesex got. There were other districts that got hundreds of thousands of dollars. We got, in essence, about 90. So we did not get a tremendous amount of money from that, but we did get something. And part of that is that we have to submit a plan to the state of Massachusetts as to how we're going to utilize that money by April 1st. So it's a fairly extensive plan that the district has to submit on how they're going to utilize that money. But again, that's the Student Opportunity Act money that I'm sure you've heard a lot about in the news.
Just the bottom half of this slide relates to the district revenue that we get, which is where we record how much of the excess and deficiency we plan to use for this budget. And we've leveled that for $1.3 million. Medicaid, we get Medicaid reimbursement for students that are receiving services. We've leveled that. School choice numbers are a little lower, and I think the reason, again, this came from the governor's numbers, and I think what you saw in 20 was slightly elevated due to a one-time shift of a student. And we do get school choice funds for each student that's school choicing in, but we also get reimbursement for special ed services, and sometimes that will vary each year to year. And our investment income. Let's change it. The operating assessments that the town calculates have two portions to it, although they usually record it as one on their budget, is an operating assessment and transportation piece. The overall operating assessment, based on the numbers from the governors and the minimum local contributions, is 6.18 overall. And again, that changes for each town depending on their per capita income and their value of their property. So they use a pretty complicated formula to come up with those operating assessments. The transportation assessment is basically the cost of our transportation with the Chapter 71 funds offset, and the difference is really based on enrollment. So you'll see that the total transportation, we had a contract that was up this year. We went out to bid for special education transportation. And again, as we've gotten in pretty much the last number of transportation bids, we got one bidder. So overall, we had a really reasonable transportation increase from both the special ed contract that's coming up, and the actual regular transportation we're seeing the savings there because we reduced one bus this past year. So you don't see that change until the next year, obviously. So that's why that's actually looking pretty good. So together, the two, they come out to about a local revenue of about 5.74, and that's the bright orange in the bottom right, bright yellow. So Ashby, again, you'll see the enrollments and their minimum local contribution. They are 4.33%, Pepperell's at 5.21, and Townsend's at 6.88. The long-term debt section includes a number of bonds that are out for the high school. We also have a temporary ban for the high school, which we just approved, I think, last meeting. We also have coming online the accelerated repair projects, which were at the Varnum Brook Elementary School, the Hawthorne Brook School, and Squanicook. So again, you see those changes coming on. There's not permanent borrowing yet on those. Those are, again, short-term, but you do see it in the debt assessment. I'll take that, I guess.
Yeah.
We recently just got our excess and deficiency certified, which is very much like a town's free cash. You have to go through a process to have that certified, and our certified number that's available is to $3,118,552, and we're using $1,300,000 of that. That's the plan for the revenues at this point. It just ends up being 41%, and again, each year, there's a number of things that go into how that E&D is calculated, but it's really whatever expenditures are left over at the end of the year and any revenues that we didn't plan for. And in the 19 year, I took a quick look tonight just because I thought that might be of interest. There was we got a reimbursement for Valley Collaborative for almost $300,000, $298,000 this year, and we also got additional transportation funds. So those two are not going to happen every single year, but happened this past year, which when we used $1.3 million, basically replenished $1.3 million, but a good portion of that wasn't from operations, it was from these two items.
So again, if you look at our projected elementary class sizes, again, very difficult, primarily at the Spalding and the Varnum, to make any changes with regard to reducing classroom teachers because of the impact that would have on class size. You'd be looking at something in the high 20s, possibly low, right around 30 in some cases. So it's very difficult to make cuts at the elementary level. If we think class size is important, generally speaking, optimum class size is around 21 to 24. We are slightly below that, but our elementary schools aren't so large that if you're dealing with, say, 5 teachers and you take out, an entire section, then you're adding and making, in many cases, the class size simply too large. Middle school. Middle school is a little bit more complicated. Again, class sizes look great, but if you are making a cut at the middle school level, you are cutting a team of teachers. So in grade 5, you could be cutting 2 or 3 teachers, so eliminating an entire team. So then you're having to replace upwards of 36, 60 students amongst the other teams, which is nearly impossible. So the class sizes, again, look very strong. The excitement, I mean, they're slightly high in grade 8 at the Nissitissit, and growing also in grade 8 at Hawthorne Brook, which is great news for our high school. But that being said, it's not the elimination of a teacher, because generally speaking at the middle school level, they're content specific and they're on a team. So you'd be reducing an entire team of teachers, which again would have a significant impact on class size. It's not just cutting a teacher, it's cutting a whole team. High school, again, I think you'll certainly see some growth from 2019 to 2021. We have gotten some positive feedback since the new high school has opened, and some of the school spirit that's taking place, and hearing that we are having some students now that we're thinking of going elsewhere remaining in the district. And that's from direct emails from parents, which is a great thing for the district. So other revenue sources, and some of these we're certainly looking to potentially use to help drive down that 3.78% budget increase. We have multiple revolving accounts. We have the athletics revolving account, which helps with athletic and transportation and supplies. Preschool, which basically addresses teacher and paraprofessional salaries. Tuition revolving, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. Building use and rental revolving, that is custodial salary, and the turf field lease. Please keep in mind that the turf field is not a part of the operating budget, and we have a 10-year, close to $1 million turf field that needs to be paid off through this lease program. The FLAC lease at Squannacook and also here at the high school. At Squannacook, they have multiple classrooms. I believe there are 10 classrooms and 2 office spaces, and here at the high school, they have 2 classrooms. That also takes care of a custodial salary and capital expenses. Circuit breaker money is used to help with special education tuition costs. School choice helps address active employee health insurance costs. Food service revolving assists with food service, obviously. And then we have multiple grants. Did you want to add anything to the grant piece on how they're utilized with Title I? No? Okay, so Title I, teachers are funded through the Title I grant. 2A is used for PD in the district. And then grant funding using the special education allocation grant is used for paraprofessional salaries in the summer school program. We can go to the next slide. So something that we are hoping we can use to drive the budget down to around the 3% range, which is what the goal was when we started these budget meetings back in September. We have the FLAC rental. We have preschool tuition, school choice, and tuition, all of which are fairly healthy revolving accounts. But our goal would be that if we are going to utilize that money, would be to utilize that money for one-time costs, not to use it for a salary or something that would be an ongoing cost, because it's not something that we can depend on long term. You never know what's going to happen with the FLAC rental, for example. School choice may go down. So anything that we can do addressing one-time costs, such as technology wiring, which is extremely expensive, the purchase of a curriculum program, those are all one-time costs that we could look at in the budget now and pay for it out of these revolving accounts, and then drop the percentage hopefully down around 3%. That's the goal. And all of them are fairly healthy and long-term. I shouldn't say long-term, over the next 3 to 5 years, they look like they'll continue. I know the FLAC rental is for 2 more years, and there's obviously the option to extend that if the district wants to extend it and wants to utilize that space in partnership with FLAC. So again, as I said, the goal is to utilize some of that money for one-time costs. Hopefully through utilizing these funds, we can get the budget closer to the goal of 3%. We do anticipate updates to retiree health insurance. The GIC vote is on February 27th. And circuit breaker funding. The Student Opportunity Act includes a 25% reimbursement through circuit breaker claims to special education transportation, which will also help in driving the budget down. So expected grants revolving funds, again, just to be more specific, preschool revolving covers a 1.5 FTE for teachers. The building rental supports custodial coverage for the FLAC. So we do use FLAC money for that custodian because a custodian in essence is a 0.5, is using at least half of their time to clean for the FLAC and the other half of the time to clean for the preschool and central office. So we do utilize a salary there. Tuition revolving, we use to support a teacher and a paraprofessional, 2 paraprofessionals actually. Special ed allocation grant is 30 FTE in special education summer school programs. Title I is 6 FTE and 1 part-time teacher for our Title I programming. Building use supports custodial overtime. Transportation, materials, and supplies are addressed in turf lease payment through athletic revolving and donations. 2A is used to support PD and curriculum work for the assistant superintendent. Circuit breakers for out-of-district tuition and school choice helps with health insurance costs. You want to take this one?
Sure. So there's an overall summary. The numbers are probably a little difficult to read, but the overall budget's broken into a number of appropriation categories: administration, instructional support, pupil services. Pupil services is where our transportation and guidance, nursing falls under pupil services. Operations and maintenance, insurance and retirement programs, debt service area, and out-of-district placements and assessments. Between these categories, we have shifts, obviously, year to year. This particular year, there was a shift of copiers, again, from a number that fell within the administration, and now they want it more specifically by building technology, or if it's related to teachers into the instructional area. So we've had to move that, and that's why it looks like there's a reduction in administration, just to be straightforward about that. Instructional support is, again, where the bulk of the teachers, paraprofessionals, professional development lines are. And I covered pupil services and operations and maintenance. It's where all utilities are, as well as the building maintenance and repairs. This budget, we have we changed the way we're doing some of that with regards to capital and have a separate capital line. And we still have a separate capital line for this year. It falls under that operations and maintenance section, though. So all down totals to $58,661,116, which is the 3.78. Summarizing, largest portion is in instructional support, and just to point out the insurance retirement programs, so items related to staffing and the instructional support are 62% of the budget. It's very heavily weighted on staffing, and you'll see the operation and maintenance. Oh, actually, second highest is the out-of-district placements and the state assessments, which are for charter schools and school choice. We have a small amount going to the other post-employment trust fund, and our 8.2% for operations and maintenance. And this is just a breakout. And pupil services, which again was the transportation, guidance, nursing area.
So conclusion is, again, feel very strongly about the new positions and looking for the librarian, which is essential for equity in the district, the school adjustment counselor, which is mandated by IEPs, the 2 custodians or facilities workers that we need to help maintain the district and maintain, the great buildings that we currently have, and then the 0.6 position to assist with the assistant superintendent in grant writing. Not confident that we can make cuts to the budget, but I'm confident that we can address some of these one-time costs through our revolving accounts in addressing issues such as technology infrastructure and other supports for students and teachers. The FY 2021 spending proposal represents our effort to continue a strong educational agenda in a challenging fiscal environment, the continued examination of our priorities and beliefs, and at a time that we are contending with the costs of serving our students and families at a level that the district demands of our public school system. Our plan is to make sure, again, that classroom teachers and class size are important. They're critical. Professional learning and program evaluation are critical elements to a successful organization, and serving the NM students within the district is best for families and our schools. That's it. Questions?
Any questions from the audience? Good.
Allowed more than one?
You're allowed more than one. Just who you are, who you represent, and just come to the mic, please.
I'm John Laddick from Pepperell, on the Pepperell Finance.
Can you speak into the microphone?
Behind the podium, so we
Sure.
Thank you.
I'm John Laddick from Pepperell. I'm on the Pepperell Finance Committee. I have a question about why the growth rate is like 3.78% in the budget when consumer price index is a lot lower than that. None of these have to be answered in real time, but I would appreciate an answer to them. The overall budget picture, I received this on Sunday from our town administrator. It was the budget narrative, the 26 or 27 pages. And it listed 15 areas, all with increases that were less than 1%, yet the overall budget is increasing at over 3%. So it seems like something is missing in the discussion of why that is the case. The discussion on staffing in the narrative section titled Expenditures, to me, is very misleading. The claim is that the staff increase is only 4.12 FTEs. Since the other staff, the 10.5 FTEs, are already in the district, because in the previous budget they were being paid for by other types of revenue sources. But now they're all being paid by the operating budget, so to me that means there's an increase of 14.62 FTEs. So I think the way that's described is not accurate, and it is a little bit misleading. You answered two of these already. How much of the increase in classroom teachers is allocated to step increases? And is there a way to understand what the benefit is of those step increases as far as the instruction goes to the students? You folks do talk a lot about collecting data and analyzing the data to see how it impacts the school. Do you have any results that show that these step increases are really positive for the students? In FY18, the certified excess in EMD funds was $450,593. How was that returned to the district towns? And it looked like the EMD in FY19 is $323,434. And what's the plan for returning that to the district? If you're just adding that as a revenue source, I think that's very misleading to the folks in the way you build your budgets. This one I sort of know what the answer is, but why are the local assessments so much higher than the increase that you are saying that you have? You're claiming you only have a 7-8% increase, yet Pepperell is going up at over 5%, and Townsend's over 6%. So there has to be some reason why the arithmetic doesn't work out. And I had some questions on specific increases in the budget. There's a section where it was superintendent, finance, and administration services increases by $47,000. What is that really covering? It says curriculum directors increased by $99,000. It seems like those folks who get step increases should be accepting more responsibility and could take over for those curriculum directors. Guidance and adjustment services, an increase of over $100,000. If there's only one full-time equivalent, that's a pretty nice salary. And there's an expense for building security system increase of $104,000. I'm just curious what's really covered with that one. So those are my questions. I have them printed up if somebody would like them. There you go. Thanks. One other question on one of the slides. If you could go back to where you were showing the enrollments. It was the one that went up to like 2022 or something.
Robin, can you go back to the slide from Nasdaq? Oh, you see, it's over here. Slide 13.
Oh, God.
Could you just go back one more?
It's over the 2021 is over the 3,000, that's like.
I can dig into that a little bit more, but I think it has to do with either the out-of-district placements or the school choice students. We talked about that just ahead of this meeting, actually.
So just to address a couple of these questions that I can answer at least partially now, and I can get more details later. The addition of the 9.5 FTEs that were added in this year and being counted as the 14 plus for next year, we didn't fill other positions that were approved in the budget last year once we realized that we had to rehire back paraprofessionals to be in compliance. So we're still going, even though other positions got approved in the budget, we did not fill them and use that money to rehire these paraprofessionals back, which we're required to do. I can give you more detail on that once we go back and make a list of what those positions were. Right now, the staff reductions are at about a 1.6 FTE, which is not much. The rationale for coaching building principals, I'll just cover very quickly. DESE requires it, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, for 2 years in order for them to get, in order for them to move towards their professional licensure. So it is a requirement. And generally speaking, you do have to hire a coach to do that.
So you can hire them before they get licensed?
No, so they don't have a professional license. You don't have a professional license as a building principal until you've been a building principal for 5 years.
Okay.
The percent of teacher increases allocated to step and column moves, we have to go back and answer that question because it's different for each step and different for each column move. And also, the contract speaks to what teachers are able to do and not able to do, what's expected of them and what's not expected of them. So taking on things that will go beyond the contracted day is not something that that can be done because it would go against the current collective bargaining agreement.
I'll take the E&D one.
Sure, E&D.
The E&D question that came up, I think each year, if our excess and deficiency is more than 5% of the next year's budget, the difference needs to be returned to the towns. And the way we've done this historically is by using the excess and deficiency in the next year's budget. So the number was 323, and we're using $1.3 million for the budget. So we are returning it to the towns. That's how that mechanism has worked for this district.
Have you already deducted that off our assessment?
It is used as a revenue source for next year. So are we able to go back or forward? Not sure. What slide is this? I'm not in the slides.
So our budget then didn't really go up by what you're saying it went up by like
It's like 14, 15.
$100,000 less.
Yeah, if we didn't use the E&D, the overall budget of what the assessment, the towns would pay another $1.3 million. It would be on that line. So that's how we return the funds to the towns.
The budget doesn't go up anymore. But what the towns have to cover goes up. So essentially, instead of giving back $100,000 to you to put into your bank, we would end up having to charge you another $100,000 in your assessment. So instead of that 2 transfers, we just put it in our revenue, and it comes automatically off the bottom line for your assessment.
One back. So like when we went through this section here on the state aid, we went over those lines, but on the first line on the district revenue side, that's where we show how much money we're putting towards to support that budget.
Right, but that's the usual amount that you've been putting in for the past few years. That doesn't count to cover the excess.
As long as we're at least $323,000, we're covering the. Some districts don't use any E&D as an example to support their budget. Yeah. So as long as, again, if we use 0, then we'd have a problem. As long as we're using greater than 323 towards the budget. What else was there? Is there anything else you want to do?
The fact that it doesn't match. Why doesn't the 3.78 match?
Oh.
Do you want to address that one? I mean, I think we should say that like a comprehensive district, 3.78% increase is a 3.78% increase. But why isn't it a regional?
Right.
So I'm asking.
I don't know if I can explain that so he understands it. Can you?
Excuse me, could everyone, if you want to be heard, please use the microphone. I have several conversations going on one side, and it's likely to confuse people at home. Thank you. So I just want to know, is the
Return that we're getting on the E&D, is that already been accounted for in our assessment?
Yes.
Okay. So in other words, our assessment, if you didn't have that money, it would be higher than it is now?
Yes.
Okay.
The question about why the assessments are up at a higher percentage than our overall budget is because our other revenue sources, like the state revenue source, only went up 1.19%.
No,
So-
0.62.
What? I'm looking at
Oh,
the
just
slide up there.
regular, 70 total.
Right, chapter 70 is, 0.602, but because our state revenues didn't increase as much as our budget, I was going to explain it perfectly, and now it's confounding me. But essentially, the revenues that we're getting elsewhere aren't going up, so the town makes up the difference. Because the state didn't go up 3.78%.
Right, that's what I figured.
Right.
So basically, you do your budgets backwards from I would do my household budget. I would look at how much money I'm coming in at my house, and I would figure out what my expenditures are and try to come out with a balance of 0 on each side. But you folks go out and just make up a budget, and then you look at how much revenue you have, and you say, oh, we don't have enough, so we'll pass it on to the town. That's really what's happening. You're no different than Neshoba Valley Technical High School. They're doing the same thing. But it's just a weird way of doing a budget.
I mean, if we put a budget together that matched of the revenue the state gave us, the revenue the towns would be comfortable providing, we'd have to come to you and say, here's all the cuts we have to make, and we're going to be giving less to the students. We can't provide the services we've been providing. We'd have to do less.
Well, that's what we're doing to the townsfolk. We're saying you're asking for extra police, extra fire, extra work at town hall, and we're saying we can't give it to you because we're giving it to the schools.
And we're not asking, we're trying to not take things away, is what we're trying to avoid, to bring a budget in line with what the state's giving us, and say a 2% assessment in the towns or a 3% assessment would cause us to reduce what we already have.
I understand that, and we're
Okay.
reducing what we have because of the schools.
Okay, I thought you were saying that
No.
you can't put the ads in that you want.
No, we can't.
Right, and we can, yeah, right.
Well, you're doing a pretty good job of it.
So can I just add something?
Yeah.
Was anything shared with the FinCom and the Board of Selectmen from the meetings that we held to discuss these?
Your assessments were going up pretty high.
But all of these were discussed in great detail at those meetings.
Right, and the basic line we got was that they're going up more than the 2.5% that we would like to see them go up.
Okay, but I can say just from being there, wasn't a basic conversation, it was fairly in-depth.
Okay.
The only thing I'd say is, again, keep walking this line, right, 3 years in a row, giving back, this 1.3 million to E&D, and if something were to happen, that isn't going to be there potentially in the future. So again, to me, it's kind of that continue to work with towns on that, because that's, we always say we only want to use it for one-time expenses, but we continue to use that for recurring things. So I appreciate the work that you all did on the budget to get it to a place where where we could maintain the support for students, because again, there's a lot of things pulling on the on these town budgets, but there's really nothing more important than kind of making sure that our kids are getting the education that they need. So appreciate the work that the FinCom did, and again, to superintendent for working with the towns to get that message out there. So appreciate that.
We can certainly work to address some of the other questions in more detail. We just need some time to do that.
Yeah, and this is just our first pass with the public, so. Any other questions from anybody? Sure.
Bill Schlostein, Town Accountant, Pepperell. Thanks for the invitation tonight. It's a very informative presentation. Essentially, I think from the meetings that were held between the district and the towns, what might not have been clear was the town's revenue, new revenue growth for the fiscal 21, which wouldn't be known until just a few weeks ago. I understand it was communicated. I want to reemphasize that we're looking at approximately $800,000 to $850,000 of revenue above what we have for revenue in fiscal 20, for an ask of $761,000 just for North Middlesex Regional. It's a big ask from that pie. When you talked about a 3% budget, I assume that's all going to be pro rata. The town Pepperell being approximately 48%, it would be approximately a $222,000 reduction in that assessment, if my math is correct. Was there, and you talked about achieving that through shifting some costs that may be included in your general fund budget now, which may be offloaded to some grants and special revenue funds? Okay. Is that it completely, or is there an ability to, you mentioned something about health insurance rates. I understand there was one of the local groups.
We're waiting for some numbers, including our teachers when they retire go to the GIC. So we're waiting for the GIC numbers, which they're scheduled to vote on February 27th. We did get health insurance numbers from Manitoba today. We still have to crunch those. I think, unfortunately for us there, when I did a quick look at it, it looks like that's not going to be huge savings just because of the number of staff that are covered currently. I was hoping that would be an area where we'd have some reductions. We will be looking at, I think, everything. We're not done yet. I mean, we have a vote. I think the vote is March 2nd. Do I have that right? So we have some time to work some of these things.
That's what the intention is, March 2nd.
For the first budget round, the committee would vote. And again, the state, as we know, hopefully these things come forward. Another area that we didn't talk about too much, which was part of the Student Opportunity Act, which we just recently got information about and how it's going to work and how we're going to be reimbursed, was related to the special ed transportation. So the special ed director and myself attended a meeting this past week about how that might look, and what it sounds like is that we'll be getting back 25% of the special ed transportation through the circuit breaker program. So there might be some funding, some additional funding, and that pays for student tuitions, students that are going out of district. So that actually is not, we haven't looked at what that number is yet. We're going to work together a little bit and see if we can come up with an estimate on that. So that might be another area. So we have some good leads on how we might get there.
And I think, too, just moving forward, working to apply for as many grants as we can. It's challenging because we're not an urban and we're not a vocational technical school, which they seem to get awarded most of the grants. But I think by working and applying for more competitive grants, hopefully those can positively impact the budget as well.
Right. I noticed the foundation budget for North Middlesex at the state, which of course we don't, is nowhere close to what it takes to operate the system, is a growth of 306% year over year. So when you talk about a 3% reduction, I think that's, it's certainly reasonable. I appreciate the time you spent tonight, and hopefully something can be done with shifting off the general fund expenses to special revenues, so that we can something we can absorb within our paltry revenue growth. I think it's shameful to see Chapter 70 inch up to less than 0.5% and leave it up to the property taxpayers. But
and we'll keep working at it. We're very committed to doing it, so we'll keep working it and see what we can do.
That's great. I'm glad that the vote is not tonight. And appreciate your time. Thank you.
There was just one more tidbit about the Student Opportunity Act that was passed. In addition to some of the changes where we mentioned some schools got a fair amount of Chapter 70 funds, and we got the $30 a student because of the enrollment. There was a group put together, or part of the act says that they're going to establish a group to look at this hold harmless concept with this districts that have lost enrollment. So there could be more information coming out about how that is playing out into the formula, and for many districts are in our position.
If I could make one follow-up question. You mentioned that you were disappointed in the return of the group insurance rates this morning, not generating as much as you might have hoped to initially. Is that because of the growth in the FTEs and in the para workforce, or
yes, it's looking at actuals, digging into
in?
the actual numbers as to where we are today versus where I was expecting us to be. Yeah.
Is there an opportunity for job sharing and splitting that workforkforce?
In some cases,
Yeah,
when we do that
in some cases now.
We have some positions that are shared.
Mm-hmm.
That is helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else from the audience? Anybody else from the committee?
I would just say, again, just reiterate on, some of the things we're trying to do with the revolving account plus the EMD, right? I mean, it's good to kind of look at that revolving account and say, one-time expenses, but we're already putting, $1.3 million into the budget that's pretty much recurring funds. So I'll be interested to see how kind of those two are we're working through that. So that'll be, I just see that building up over time.
I know one thing that came up in one of the budget meetings, I think it was the last one, was how to kind of wean ourselves operationally off the E&D. Mm-hmm. Do we have a plan for that, or have we put thought into that? And
That's the problem.
Right.
No, we don't.
We're dependent on it. We're hooked.
I think it's a combination of the E&D and just a capital plan that we haven't.
$5.7 million on the capital plan to spend in the next 5 years, and we're only budgeting $250,000 towards it.
Right, but if you took that 250 out of operations and used E&D towards that, would that wean us off over time? For one time, more of those one-time, like Rob was saying, like more of the one-time.
That's shuffling.
It is, but I guess when you get to the end of that, then it's more your true capital plan and not relying operationally on E&D. Because if E&D goes away, then what do we do? Then the towns are going to be left.
Correct.
For a level service, they're going to be left getting even a bigger hit. But
And the problem
it's just, it is a shell game a bit, but.
And the problem with the revolving is, yes, we bring in revenue, but that revenue, like FLAC, they incur costs. So we're covering the costs with the revenue. And occasionally there is some residual that builds up in the account. We may pull in more revenue than we spend out in costs. We go through cleaning out all those residual amounts in there. I mean, yes, they're one-time costs, but there's always one-time costs. So the one-time cost category is recurring, even if they're different for different reasons. So we're going to run out of the ability to cover one-time costs because we're cleaning out all these things.
No, but I think the one-time costs are easier to defray if you needed to, whereas the operationals you can't. You can't not pay a teacher, but you can not fix a lawnmower.
Right.
If you had to. Not ideal. It's going to cause other issues, but those are things that you can.
Right.
As we've done all over.
We're just doing that for years, though.
No, understood. But just from a budget perspective, I think to, swap those.
You could work that. Yeah, I mean, you could work it to do it. Again,
it's all the same money at the end of the day.
But it's something to fix a problem short term. It's not sustainable for the long haul.
No, I don't think.
Well, I'm not saying that you are, but I'm just making the statement. I happen to be looking at you.
Well, it ends up being right. I mean, you have D&D is supposed to be there so that you make. You're making those, the budget says do this, and then all of a sudden you have this 9.1 FTEs that need to be added back in, so you use E&D to kind of, cover those things during the course of the year. When you already using EMD at the beginning, then those 9.5 come in and you got to cut it from other places. It's a bit of a challenge.
Using EMD to cover an FTE like that, what do you do the next budget year?
Well, then you got to work it at that point. But at some point, you can't. Right now, we're cutting things from the budget for these one-time, for these emergencies that are coming in. Right. And EMD is supposed to help kind of work that at least for a year's time frame, as far as I'm concerned.
Anything else from anybody else? Well, I want to thank John and Bill from Pupil for being here. Is there anybody here from Townsend or Ashby by any chance who wants to make any comments? I'll let the record show there's nobody here from Townsend or Ashby. All right. I guess we will, if there's no other questions or discussion, I'll take a motion to close the public hearing.
I make a motion to adjourn the public hearing.
Second.
And Susan, all those in favor of closing the public hearing, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so now we will return to our regular scheduled meeting. Thank you. So we have the consent agenda, the approval of minutes from January 7th, and a series of donations for various projects which are in our packet.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you, Rob. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Just say real quick, thank you for everyone that donated to Donors Choose to help with all these classroom projects the various teachers have put out there.
Yes, much appreciated.
That's not what she objected.
That's what. Do you have anything else, Superintendent, on the budget?
I do not.
All right. Public communications, one more chance for folks to say something. Okay. I'm going to forego the reading of all the subcommittees. Are there any subcommittee chairs that have any reports they'd like to give?
No.
No? No?
I have one.
Go for it, Susan.
So the school start time subcommittee, I mentioned last time we put a survey together. That survey was published on Friday. It closes tonight. Probably actually close it in the morning to give people who like to stay up late, which is not me, a chance to have some final input. As of about 6 p.m. this evening, I looked, we have 420 replies from parents. We have 141 replies from employees and 151 replies from students 7 through 12. So started reading through those replies that came in over the weekend. It does take quite a bit of time, but it was good feedback, and I look forward to seeing it all together. We have a subcommittee meeting tomorrow to review those replies and continue our outreach to the various stakeholders to get their input on this process.
You said you posted that survey on Friday?
Yes.
And you already have almost over 700?
It was like immediate.
That's impressive.
People, at the end of the day, Friday, I think for parents, I already had 185, and the rest came in
Good. That's
over the
excellent.
weekend. Yeah.
Anything else, Susan?
That's it.
Excellent, thank you. Warrant Subcommittee available for committee review are accounts payable warrants 20-0124, 20-0130, 20-0203, and 20-0206, and payroll warrant dated January 30, 2020. We have no old business. Under new business, we have one item regarding non-student attendance on school field trips. Do you want to give something, or do you want to? Ms. Vassapoli, I assume? All right.
Here, I'm just here to appeal the committee's decision to not let Isabella join the 8th grade field trip. she's been with the school district for the last 8+ years, and it wasn't until this past school year that we pulled her out, given the opportunity to put her in a private school that was granted to us. So all her years have grown up in addition to both my children. So her curriculum has been based on the North Middlesex School District. So that being said, we wanted to appeal to the school district to allow her to attend the 8th grade field trip.
You want me to give a little background?
I can give a little background. I don't have specific dates, but a few months back, I received communication from the administration at the Nissitissit Middle School that the Vassapolis had requested that their daughter be permitted to attend the Washington, D.C. field trip. At that point in time, I did alert some committee members to it and had reached out to legal counsel to discuss with legal counsel as it is a request that I have not received in the past. And I did communicate back to the Vassapolis that it was not something that legal counsel recommended. And I also alerted the school committee to that as well.
Questions from the committee? So this is your daughter had attended in the district up until this current
Until
year?
this past year.
Okay.
My question is, what is, if anything, being asked of the committee at this point?
So we are being asked to, so the Vassapoli family is appealing the decision of the superintendent and legal. So the next chain up would be us.
Okay.
So we're being asked to make a ruling to either uphold the superintendent's decision or to overturn the superintendent's decision.
Okay.
So that's what.
I guess if I could add.
Sure.
The decision is basically discretionary based upon the policy that you gave me on not allowing students enrolled outside the school district, and also my plea that she similar students that are, say, homeschooled would have the opportunity to partake in this district that they would normally be enrolled in if they didn't have, say, the athletic or certain classes or for them to be able to partake in homeschool. And what was brought to me was that normally you would approve the curriculum that a homeschooler would go to or would have, and then based upon that, it would add to whatever it is to enhance their learning. So I reached out to the director of the school that she's in right now, and we do currently do the core system that we do here at Middlesex and that she's grown up with in the last 8 years. So I guess what I was trying to figure out is what is the legitimate reason why she wouldn't be able to go. If it was insurance or legally not being able to or being responsible for her, I don't think that's the case because we would have to sign a waiver because it is a regulator company. They are responsible for the children. There is insurance bonding on there as well. So that's where I'm kind of a little stuck at why she wouldn't be able to go, knowing that she grew up with the school district. It wasn't a pursued approach to try to take her out of the school system. It was something that was brought to our attention. She was blessed with the ability to be able to go to a school that's a 1-to-5 ratio. We thought it would really enhance her learning and add to what Middlesex has given to her so far. And we kind of didn't want to take that milestone of going on an 8th grade trip away from her. So I guess
part of the lacrosse team too.
Right. So right now she is part of the lacrosse team, the Nissitissit lacrosse team. I did ask about that ahead of time to Christine Schwartz, who's the head of the lacrosse, and she said that she would be able to play this year. So we did sign her up, and she is currently practicing now. So I'm still trying to toy with the a legitimate reason why she wouldn't be able to go, since it's not a financial burden on the school either.
I have two
quick questions.
Sure.
First, just to clarify, she is not enrolled in the North Middlesex Regional School
No, not
District?
at the time.
Okay, and what is the field trip?
The 8th grade DC field trip.
Okay, so it's an 8th grade out of district, or like out of state field trip? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In which the tour company we would be responsible in signing a waiver with the tour company, just like.
Yeah, but North Middlesex would also be responsible for her safety, well-being?
Well, we looked into it, and it looks like the fact that the parents, and we signed this last time for our son as well, who went on an 8th grade trip, that they are primarily responsible for the children. That's the touring bus, that's the security for the hotel rooms, for the safety of the tour itself, just like if you and I went on a tour with the regular tour company.
So just a couple other things that the attorney shared. Although it is run by a tour company, according to our attorney, there is a difference in that the chaperones are North Middlesex employees. So that's the first piece. He also mentioned that policies, although discretionary, only cover students enrolled in the North Middlesex Regional School District. And the last point was that it could create issues down the road for potentially opening up field trips to any student, regardless of whether or not they ever attended North Middlesex Regional School District or reside in the district, to being able to go on field trips. That's what the attorney shared with me.
Right. I would say that opening the possibility of other people who are not enrolled in the school district would be something to think about, but Isabella has been enrolled in the school district for 7 years plus. It's not like we moved into the district and decided to, there's an 8th grade school trip coming up, and why don't we just go ahead and put her in there. We've been active in this community, active in this school district, very active, and I think that plays a very heavy part in this decision. She's connected with many people and many kids in the school district. The teachers know her personally. It would be the 8th graders, all the 8th grade teacher knows her. So it's not this unknown child with any deficits or any obstacles that they would have to overcome. And since it was discretionary and there wasn't actually a particular policy based upon that, other than the argument that we want to enhance the curriculum, the core curriculum, she is doing a core curriculum, and she has up to this point as well. And it's not just the 8th grade curriculum that has based her learning in the last 7 years.
Again, I feel for the situation you're in, but I don't see how we can go against what the administration and legal is advising us. I mean, that's what we pay them for. And I mean, your daughter's not in the school, so to me, it seems like it sets a precedent going forward, for sure.
So she played lacrosse.
I get all that.
So as an example, I mean, she's playing for lacrosse and she uses the Vandenberg gym. So are the teachers responsible and is the district responsible that she's using the Vandenberg gym as an unenrolled person? Is that a liability on the school? Is an unenrolled person using a gym?
The lacrosse organization, not the district. It's not a ethnicity.
You're talking about being on a bus versus being in a gym.
So can I just ask that we delay this vote, and so I can have additional discussion with the school committee in the near future, please? Thank you.
Can I have one question?
Sure. I just wanted to delay the vote. That's the only point.
I'm just curious what authority teachers and staff would have over a student that's not part of the district. Not to mention, it's not a daytime field trip. This is multiple nights, overnight, that she would be sharing a room with 3 students from the district, unsupervised at night. I'm just curious what kind of...
Well, the student would not be held to the same standard that the other students in the statistic would be, because the behavioral code would not applied to her.
She has held to that in the last 7 years.
Oh, I'm not questioning that. I'm not questioning that.
Yeah.
I'm not questioning that at all. I'm just saying that.
Is there a policy on field trips?
Again, policies don't apply to students that aren't enrolled in our district.
Yeah.
And the behavior goes in line with, anytime you're on a field trip, the behavior code is something that's being enforced, the school behavior code.
What about a dual enrollment student? Does that have any precedent?
It depends on where it happens. If it happens at the college, then they would have to deal with the college piece. If it happens in NM, then they would deal with NM.
Okay.
So if the student's dual enrolled at Fitchburg State, but they play sports and they do something that violates the discipline code with regard to sports, it'd be a consequence of sports. If they do something that would violate the...
So what you're saying is we could actually enroll her in Nissitissit school to go on the trip? If I enrolled her this week in the Nissitissit school, the week before the trip, she's an enrolled student within a week. Because we take students in the middle of the school year.
That's something I would need to check on.
Well, we'll enroll her into Nissitissit for a week. And then we'll pull her out.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's ridiculous to have to go that way.
I know, but I mean, if it's a fact of enrollment, then why couldn't we do that? Was there anything against enrolling the student at any time during the year?
Enroll a student, would you have to withdraw them?
Yes.
You have to withdraw them, yes. Mm-hmm. You can't be enrolled in two schools at the same time.
Unless we go for dual enrollment in that case, where...
Dual enrollment is with colleges.
Okay, so it does not apply to this. So basically, you're waiting for time to think on this and this discretionary policy, and the fact that she has a history with North Middlesex pretty much means nothing. That I'm trying to understand that.
I'm not saying that it doesn't mean nothing. I think obviously that she had a great experience here at K-7, but we still have to, and my job is to make sure that the school district is in good well-being with regard to following the law, following policies. The advice that I got from legal counsel was that our policies apply to NM students only. They do not apply to anyone else. So that's what I'm dealing with, making sure that the district is not put at risk by having a student that does not fall under the district umbrella attend a field trip.
So how does that marry with the homeschooling, where a homeschooler is not enrolled in the North Middlesex School District?
So the homeschooler is, their curriculum, it gets approved by the assistant superintendent. There's a very clear program, there's communication.
Right, which would be the Mass Core, basically.
Yes, but the Mass Core is followed in all public high schools in the state. So that's something that's followed. And generally speaking, there's the option for school choice students to attend some classes in the district or none at all. The student is enrolled in the district. It's my understanding that your daughter goes to a private school.
Correct.
So a private school is not a public charter. It is not a homeschooled student. It is not a regional vocational technical school. It is a private school.
But it is still doing a curriculum that needs to be, say, looked over, say you would, just like you would with a homeschool.
Sure, so I oversee the homeschooling program here in North Middlesex. So the curriculum has to come through me. I look at it with the parents, but anything that has to do with North Middlesex, such as attending a class, coming for a special, things like that, that's done on an individual basis based on the number of students in the class and, availability of what the student's trying to accomplish. I've been here for 6 years, and I have not approved any homeschool student to do an overnight field trip. For liability reasons.
But where's the liability, though?
They're not one of our students. So that precedent has not been set through homeschooling.
So I'm just trying to understand that. Would there be any reason for parents to sign a waiver with the tour company?
From my understanding, talking to my middle school principals for this request, this was not honored in other circumstances for homeschooling students. So we have not done that for other requests. For the 6 years I've been here.
Okay. So before we left, and it wasn't even a decision that was made. I didn't want to throw anybody under the bus, and that's not my intention. But I did speak with the principal, with Mrs. Assistant, who's known myself, my daughter, my son, our family for the number of years that we've been here. And I did approach her with that. And the conversation that we had, and via email and text, was that there does not seem at this point that there would be a problem with that she personally had no problem with it, that the teachers involved that would have been on her team, that she would have been on, does not have an issue with that. Other parents as well. The gentleman who runs the school now is more than willing to help advocate for her going to another district's field trip to enhance the education. I don't find a legitimate reason why this policy, this discretionary policy, would not be, I mean, if it was a policy that was so strong in the legal aspect of it, then it would be set as not a discretionary. So it's not, yes, the student can go, no, the student can go, yes or no. It's really up to the school district to decide to do that. So based upon the facts that I've given forth in history, in familiarity, the connection of community with the school and outside the school, then that's why I'm appealing to the decision to be made for her to be able to go.
Ms. Vespoli, just a clarification. Are you saying that the building principal told you prior to you?
Prior to me leaving.
The building principal?
Mrs. Gleason.
Okay.
Prior to, so it is a new school that had opened up in Wyndham. I'll just give you a history on it. It's a 1-to-5 ratio. It was an opportunity that was approached to me by somebody in the tech school who became pretty close to us in the sense of knowing our children. So he came to us about this school. I wasn't sure about it. Pulling my daughter out of school district that's been since she's, been since kindergarten was a little bit uneasy. So I went to Mrs. Gleason and I wanted her opinion on this. Was I going to send her 45 minutes away and not ever see my daughter again? So I wasn't sure about those logistics. We were also concerned about her emotional well-being, about pulling her out in the beginning of 8th grade and asking her about certain things like the field trip, which was a big thing on her mind. Not seeing her friends, being able to play lacrosse, which she'd played since she was 6 years old with the district. And the conversation was, I don't see that there's a problem. If she wants to come to the dance, she can come to the dance. If she wants to come to the breakfast, she wants to come to the breakfast. Those are quote unquote. And then there shouldn't be a problem with going to the DC trip. I will speak to Brad personally, and when things calm down with the beginning of the school year, which is always very, very taxing. And that's where it was left. So before we even pulled her out, we approached these things.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it does. Thank you.
I know that this is a unique case. It's not where we moved into the district and we decided to partake in something that goes on in the district, and we had our daughter, somewhere in a different private school. We still reside in this district. Like I said, we are active community members in and out of the school, and have been. In April.
I'm just curious if an exception was made, what does that do going forward? So if somebody from another school or somebody that said, I know you're on a close time frame and you're living in town, but where does it change? If I'm like, oh, my kids were in the district till 3rd grade and they want to go, or, now they go to Fitchburg and they want to go. So
She's still enrolled in this school, until 1 week before.
So it's a close proximity of time, so, but what does that lead going forward? I'm just kind of putting it out there as,
I think you need to get legal language that's not precedent setting, something in writing, and then take it from there. If the decision, once a decision's made, one way or the other.
So is the intent to further consult with legal and see what, if anything, can be done?
Yes.
And we would discuss at our next meeting?
Yes.
Is that timeframe, I'm assuming that works?
What kind of liability is there? I mean, if that's
sure.
Is there a liability to this? Because all the chaperones, volunteers, I mean, they're people. They're just. Is there a precedent when you're on a school bus in Washington, D.C., is school policy enforced in the hotel room in Washington, D.C., and does that, and other staff, right? And what is the liability of something like that? That would be something we'd like to know.
So you spoke to the behavior of the student. Not, and it wasn't taken personally whatsoever. No, it wasn't. Right.
These kids at night, they don't have a chaperone in their room with them. The chaperones still have an authority over them, but they're not in the room with these students.
So I guess what can transpire would be a contract between us and the students that are roomed with her, or the staff that will be watching her, or having them under their care. If the teachers that are going to be there I know Mrs. Gleason usually goes, or Mrs. Young, they've known Isabella and they know what her demeanor is, they know her behavior, and if they have no objection to being responsible for her, then that can be something on per se her side, lack of better words. Whatever needs to be done to allow her to go, and not just on the discretionary decision, be it writings or contracts or agreements between us and the school district or the teachers themselves. Whatever needs to be done.
Nancy, how many requests have been denied in your tenure here? Do you know, ballpark? Handful?
Not many, not even.
Not even?
No.
Because I guess for me, my main concern, I try to take the emotion out of it, because I both feel very passionate about your daughter, which is great, and wanting her to still be part of the community, which I think is fantastic. But for me, I think, again, my opinion as a committee, we need to look at the black and white of the policy and make sure that if we put your daughter in a position and something happens to her, what is our liability? Or if she does something to somebody else, what is our liability? What precedent does it set for a middle school dance where we check student IDs, or you have to show your schedule to prove that you're a student? Would we allow non-district students to now attend a dance? So I like the superintendent's idea. Let's take some time and explore how to tighten that up. But
that was definitely a good question that you just asked, how many people have actually been denied, or how many people who have actually approached this. Right. And if there is a black and white, which there isn't, and that's the reason I'm appealing, because there really isn't a black and white.
I'm sorry, honey. If you want to talk to council, I would say, where does the liability lie? Why are we being bonded, paying $1,000 to send a kid to D.C. and paying for an insurance cost? Where does the liability go if it's something happened in a hotel room? Is that liability placed on the tour company? That's something to ask the attorney, or is it placed on Nissitissit? Is Nissitissit, not liable for that, or does it go on the policy of the tour company that all the parents sign the waivers and it's built into their policy? Because I read their insurance policy and the waiver, and it's extensive, that it covers everything. It covers not only the students, it also covers the volunteers, and they take on a lot of liabilities. So if that liability is passed on to the tour company and no liability is placed on the school district, that would be something that council needs to read the contract with I would say, the tour company.
Well, and to ensure that student is, I guess, defined or not defined. Because if we send a non-district student on that tour, is that policy even enforceable if we've sent someone who maybe not be covered? So I think we do need to answer that.
Right.
That's what we have to ask council.
Right.
Absolutely.
So is that waiver per person or per student?
Correct, right.
Right. Okay, I understand.
Right.
And then my other question or concern is just around, I don't, as a committee, don't want to deal with these requests all the time, so I don't want to open Pandora's box. So I do want to make sure, if we end up making an exception here, that we follow it up very quickly with an ironclad policy that is very clear on what's acceptable and how that's handled and who approves it. And
well, I agree with what you were saying. It's like, we open up Pandora's box and everybody imaginable that, but that would be somewhere that the school committee would write in a policy of what would be.
So amend the policy of not being discretionary, but to be cut and dry.
I agree with that too.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a very good point, and I really want to reiterate, I don't think any of us are sitting here thinking that your child is anything less than exceptional. That's not a considering factor for me, but the idea of, okay, so this child from outside of the district does child X, out there does something against a child in our district, and that just opens up a whole other mess. But, trying to figure out
who is responsible for that.
Who's responsible.
Right. And if it's per person or per student, so who is responsible?
Yeah, because we're all sympathetic. Right. We're all parents of kids in the district. We're all
what is that
parents of kids, period. And so.
But I also think we have to somehow become the judge on that character, because I don't want it to just be after the fact liability, like, oh, Susie punched Johnny, great, now we'll deal with it. But how do we judge that character up front to say, yep, that student would be okay, would fit in, has demonstrated good character.
So I think the way that she's demonstrated herself or carried herself in the last 7 years, or that could call to her character.
Oh, absolutely.
Right, exactly.
Well, I'm just on person X, yeah. Like,
right, we understand.
So next week,
right.
John Smith comes before us and says, I want my son to go on this trip as well. I don't know heads or tails who that person is or how they conduct themselves, or are they trying to get on that trip because their girlfriend's going? And
like I said, it could be someone moved to town just enrolled this week, and the trip's in 2 weeks.
You don't know them either.
It's like
absolutely.
You can't not let them go, because even though they've only been in the school district for 2 weeks, you have to actually let them go because they just enrolled.
Right.
Chair, I'd like to suggest that we wait till the next school committee meeting, and I don't think there's any benefit to continuing the conversation at this point.
We appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other last comments?
No.
All right. Any business not reasonably anticipated from anybody? Any agenda items for our next meeting?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
I'll give that to Tom. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you all.